Welcome to Shadows of Trust, where trust doesn't break, it dies last. We don't scream about betrayal here. We just live with it, and sometimes we become it. Shadows of Trust. The rain-slicked streets of suburban New Jersey reflected the neon glow of passing cars as Alex Harlan pulled into the driveway of the modest two-bedroom apartment he shared with Sarah. It was late, too late for excuses, too late for anything that mattered anymore. Inside, the air felt thick with unspoken words and the ghost of what they used to be. Sarah was curled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the screen's cold light. Even in that pale glow, she was beautiful, the same sharp cheekbones and soft mouth that had made him stumble over his words 5 years ago at that college party. "You're home," she said flatly, not looking up. Alex nodded, dropping his keys on the counter with a clatter that echoed his exhaustion. The sound seemed to reverberate through the silence that had become their constant companion. They'd been together 5 years, since that rainy night when he'd bumped into her at a campus party, spilling her drink and sparking a laugh that had melted his defenses. She'd chosen him over Mark Castellano, the golden boy who could charm any girl he wanted. Mark, with his easy smile and quarterback confidence. But Sarah had looked at Alex and said, "You're different. You're real." Now standing in their kitchen, Alex wondered if she'd finally realized her mistake. His job as a mid-level accountant had turned into a soul-crushing grind of overtime and deadlines. But that was the excuse, wasn't it? The truth he wouldn't admit even to himself most nights, was that he'd stopped trying, stopped listening when she talked about her design projects, stopped touching her hand across the dinner table, stopped kissing her goodnight. How many times had she said, "Can we talk?" How many times had he muttered, "Later, I'm exhausted," and turned away? 6 months, he thought now, watching her silhouette against the window. 6 months of later. "We need to talk," he murmured, but she waved him off. "Not tonight, Alex. I'm tired." He watched her retreat to the bedroom, a knot of regret twisting in his gut. He loved her, God he did, but the cracks were widening, and he wondered if they could ever seal them, if he even wanted to. The thought arrived unbidden and unwelcome, carrying with it a surge of self-loathing so sharp it made his chest ache. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds like a reluctant intruder. Alex sat at the kitchen table, nursing his coffee and staring at nothing when Sarah emerged from the bedroom. She was already dressed, her bag packed and sitting by the door. "I'm heading to my parents' place in Pennsylvania for a week," she announced, pouring herself coffee with practiced efficiency. "Need to clear my head." 600 kilometers away, she said. Family time. But her eyes darted away when she spoke, and Alex felt a prickle of unease. "You sure that's all?" he asked, trying to sound casual, even as something cold settled in his stomach. She shrugged, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, just need some space." Space. The word hung between them like a guillotine blade, glinting in the morning light. As she packed her suitcase that afternoon, humming softly to herself, Alex watched from the doorway. Her movements were too deliberate, too rehearsed, the way someone moves when they're trying to look casual while their heart races. He remembered the texts he'd glimpsed on her phone weeks ago, innocent enough on the surface, but from Mark Castellano. The one she'd sworn was just a friend now. The one who'd sent a laughing emoji at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Jealousy gnawed at him, but he pushed it down. Trust was the foundation, right? Or was it just a shadow he'd been too tired to examine? "Drive safe," he said when she left, kissing her cheek. Her skin felt cold. She smiled, that same forced smile, and wheeled her suitcase out the door. Alex stood at the window watching her car disappear down the street and thought, "I did this. I pushed her away, night after night, later after later. This is my fault." But the thought that followed was darker. But she's the one who's lying. 3 days into her trip, Alex was driving aimlessly through town, trying to shake off the loneliness that had settled over the apartment like dust. The place felt cavernous without her, every room echoing with his failure. He stopped at a red light near Lucia's, their favorite Italian bistro, the one with the outdoor patio strung with fairy lights, where they'd celebrated their first anniversary, where he'd told her he loved her for the first time. Laughter floated from the tables, and that's when he saw her. Sarah. Not in Pennsylvania, but right there, her hand intertwined with Mark Castellanos across a candlelit table. She threw her head back in a laugh that Alex hadn't heard in months, hadn't deserved to hear in months. Her fingers tracing Mark's forearm with an intimacy that made Alex's vision blur. Mark. Of course it was Mark. The guy who'd always gotten everything. The guy Sarah had walked away from 5 years ago, saying Alex was the one. Betrayal hit him like a punch to the chest, sharp, breathless, followed immediately by a wave of self-hatred so intense he thought he might vomit. You drove her to this. You made her so lonely she... No. He fumbled for his phone, hands shaking, and snapped photos through the car window. Zoom in on their intertwined hands, the way she leaned into him, the kiss, tender and deep, that lasted 5 seconds too long to be anything but real. Proof undeniable. Behind him, a horn blared. The light had turned green. Alex drove home in a haze, the images burning into his mind like a brand. Alone in the apartment, he paced, tears stinging his eyes. The photos glowed on his phone screen, each one a knife twist. How long? Why? But he knew why, didn't he? The rough patch. They'd argued about his work, her frustrations, his constant exhaustion. He'd been cruel in his indifference, turning away from her in bed, saying not tonight until she'd stopped asking. He'd killed them slowly, day by day, with neglect as cold as a knife. But this was her choice. Guilt flickered in his thoughts like a guttering candle, but rage, hot and clarifying, snuffed it out. He wouldn't confront her yet. No, he'd play the long game. If she wanted to destroy them, he'd make sure she felt every splinter. That night, Alex sat at his desk, the lease agreement spread before him, month to month, requiring 60 days' notice. Sarah's name nowhere on it. His name alone, an oversight from when they'd first moved in. Or perhaps fate. He called the landlord, Mr. Rossi, a gruff but kind Italian immigrant who'd always liked him, who brought them leftover cannoli from his wife's kitchen. "I'm giving notice," Alex said, voice steady despite the storm inside. 60 days. I'm moving out. Rossi paused. "Everything okay, kid?" Alex hesitated, then spilled it all. The photos, the lie, the trip to Pennsylvania that was really a candlelit dinner with her high school ex. Rossi sighed heavily. "Madonna, I've seen this before. You need help moving on?" "Yeah," Alex said quietly. "I do." By morning, Alex had scouted a new place, a small condo across town, anonymous and fresh. He'd keep it secret, pack in silence, plan every detail. As he hung the keys to the new place on a hook that evening, a plan crystallized in his mind, cold and precise as a surgeon's blade. Revenge wasn't just about anger, it was about reclaiming control. But beneath it, heartbreak pulsed, memories of Sarah's smile on their first morning together, lazy Sundays in bed, the way she'd trace patterns on his chest and whisper, "I'm so lucky." Was she lucky? He thought bitterly. Or was she trapped with a man who stopped seeing her? Could he really do this? He stared at the photos on his phone, zooming in on her face. Radiant, alive, more vibrant than she'd looked in months. "You made her look like that once," a voice whispered. "And you stopped trying." He silenced it. Yes. For his sanity, yes. Sarah returned a day early, her suitcase thumping against the doorframe. "Missed you," she said, pulling him into a hug that felt mechanical, rehearsed. Alex forced a smile, his skin crawling at the contact. She smelled different, some cologne that wasn't his, something expensive and masculine. "How was the family?" he asked, watching her eyes. She faltered for a split second, so brief he might have imagined it. "Good, relaxing. Mom sends her love." Liar. The word echoed in his skull, but he smiled and nodded. Over the next weeks, he played the part, distant but not hostile, the same shell of a man he'd been for months. It wasn't hard. He'd had practice. "Maybe we should try couples therapy," he suggested one evening over Chinese takeout, watching her reaction carefully. She nodded vaguely, chopsticks pausing midair. "Yeah, maybe." She never brought it up again. Sex was off the table, not that she offered. He'd catch her staring at her phone at odd hours, smiling at messages that made his stomach churn. A little laugh, quickly stifled, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Nights she stayed out late, claiming girls' night or crashing at a friend's. "Okay," he'd say, voice neutral, while inside fury simmered like lava beneath a thin crust. He imagined her with Mark, the intimacy they'd shared, the secrets whispered in darkness. Shame washed over him. Had he not been enough? Had he ever been enough? But he channeled it into the plan, feeding the rage like kindling into a fire. Rossi helped, scheduling viewings when Sarah was at work, or meeting Mark for her errands. The movers were booked for a Saturday morning, early when she'd still be asleep after another late night out. "New tenants are eager," Rossi whispered during one call. "Russian couple, cash in hand. They move in Monday." Alex nodded, the noose tightening around her perfect little lie. In quiet moments, folding laundry, washing dishes, he'd think, "I could just talk to her. I could say, I know. We could try to fix this." But then he'd see her phone light up with Mark's name, and the moment would pass. One rainy afternoon, Alex found an old photo album in the closet, snapshots of their early days. Sarah's head on his shoulder at the beach, their first apartment together with its peeling wallpaper and her terrible abstract paintings on the walls. A selfie from the night he'd proposed at Lucia's, her eyes shining with tears. Nostalgia hit hard, mingled with betrayal like poison in honey. He almost called her, almost confronted her right then. But then her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Mark. "Can't wait for tonight. Same place?" His blood boiled. He deleted the text, carefully, methodically, and watched it vanish like it had never existed. "See how it feels?" he thought. "See how it feels when something you care about just disappears." That night, she came home late, reeking of wine and another man's cologne, the same scent from before, now familiar and nauseating. "Fun with the girls?" he asked mildly from the couch, not looking up from his laptop. She yawned, kicking off her heels. "Yeah, exhausting. Dinner went too long." He lay awake beside her that night, staring at the ceiling while she slept soundly, one arm thrown across his chest, a gesture that once meant comfort and now felt like a lie made flesh. "This is justice," he whispered to himself in the darkness. Or was it? Doubt crept in like smoke under a door. Maybe therapy could fix them. Maybe if he just told her how much he'd failed her. No. The photos reminded him. Trust shattered like glass, sharp and impossible to repair. And he'd never been good at putting broken things back together. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that mocked heartbreak with its cloudless sky and cheerful birdsong. Alex had hired a crew, 3 efficient strangers in matching uniforms who arrived at 6 a.m. sharp. They moved with practiced precision, loading his furniture into the truck. The couch they'd bought together, the kitchen table where they'd shared 1,000 meals, the bed that had grown cold between them. Sarah stirred from sleep around 7:30, padding into the living room in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "What's going on?" she mumbled, then stopped cold. The apartment was nearly empty. Her clothes and toiletries were piled in black garbage bags by the door. Not boxes, garbage bags, the kind you'd use for trash. He'd done it deliberately, methodically the night before while she'd been out with Mark. The crew paused, looking to Alex. He walked to the coffee table and pulled out the printed photos, fanning them out like a poker hand. Sarah and Mark at Lucia's, hands intertwined. Sarah and Mark kissing outside his car. Sarah and Mark at a hotel entrance, her hand on his chest. "This," he said, voice ice cold and steady. Her face drained of color as she stared, her lips parting in a silent gasp. "Alex, I can explain," but her voice cracked, guilt flooding her eyes like water through a broken dam. "You lied," he said quietly, "about everything." Tears welled in her eyes, regret, shame, fear. "It was a mistake," she whispered, sinking onto the bare floor. "The rough patch. I felt so alone. You wouldn't even look at me anymore. For months, Alex. I tried to talk to you, and you just... So you went back to Mark," he finished, his voice flat. "Mark Castellano, the guy you swore meant nothing, the guy you said you'd chosen me over." He laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Guess you finally figured out you picked wrong, huh?" She shook her head frantically. No, that's not..." "How long?" he demanded. She hesitated, tears streaming down her face. "How long, Sarah?" 3 months, she whispered. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. 90 nights, 90 lies. The number hit him like a physical blow, not sharp, but dull and spreading, the kind that leaves you breathless. "Please, Alex, we can work this out. I'll end it. He shook his head, snapping one last photo. Her on her knees amid the pile of garbage bags, mascara running down her cheeks, the apartment bare behind her. He didn't know why he took it. Documentation? Proof of her pain to match his own? Or just cruelty, pure and simple? Mr. Rossi appeared at the door, keys in hand. "Miss, you've got until midnight. New tenants move in Monday morning. Anything left goes to the curb." Sarah gasped, looking from Rossi to Alex in disbelief. You planned this. You've known for weeks." "You wanted space," Alex said quietly, grabbing his jacket. "Now you've got it. All the space in the world." He walked to the door, the crew following with the last of his boxes. "Alex!" she screamed, scrambling to her feet. "Please! I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He stopped at the threshold, hand on the doorframe. For a moment, just a heartbeat, he almost turned back. Almost said, "I'm sorry too. I'm sorry I stopped trying. I'm sorry I was so buried in my own misery I couldn't see you drowning in yours." Almost said, "Maybe we're both to blame." But then he remembered Mark's hand on her cheek in the photo. Mark's lips on hers. 3 months of lies. "Goodbye, Sarah," he said and walked out. Her sobs followed him down the hallway, echoing off the walls like a requiem. As the truck pulled away, Alex stood on the sidewalk, watching the building shrink in the side mirror. His hands were shaking. His chest felt hollow. He'd executed the plan flawlessly. Cool, calculated, controlled. Victory should have tasted sweet. Instead, it tasted like ash. At the new condo that night, surrounded by unpacked boxes, Alex sat on the floor and scrolled through old photos on his phone. Sarah laughing at the beach, Sarah asleep on his chest, Sarah holding up a terrible painting she'd made of him grinning. "I did this," he thought. "I pushed her away until she found someone who wouldn't." His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "I'm so sorry. Mark was a rebound from us falling apart. I still love you. I never stopped loving you. Please." Shock rippled through him. A rebound from them falling apart, as if it had just happened, as if they hadn't both pulled the threads until everything unraveled. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He started typing. "I'm sorry, too. I'm sorry I stopped seeing you. I'm sorry I let work become more important than us. I'm sorry I said later so many times you stopped asking. Maybe we could..." He stared at the words, his vision blurring. Maybe they could what? Start over? Pretend 3 months of betrayal and 6 months of neglect never happened? Could broken things ever be whole again? Or would they just be broken things held together with tape and hope? His finger moved to the delete button. One letter vanished, then another, then all of them. He pressed delete, watched the cursor eat every letter he'd just confessed, and felt something inside him die with the same quiet click. He blocked her number. Then he sat in the darkness of his new apartment, clean, anonymous, silent, and wondered if some shadows of trust were too deep to escape. If some betrayals, both hers and his, left scars that never truly healed. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, Alex Harlan sat alone with his choices, his revenge, and his regret. And for the first time in months, he let himself cry.
If this resonated with you, remember, it's fiction, but your story matters. Share in comments if you're comfortable.